Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 18 of Mindclickers, where it's time to click both heads in 2021. I'm currently joined here today by Mark Josey, who is currently the CEO of the Kansas City Pioneers and also the CEO of a local Kansas City marketing company called Social Apex. How are you going today, mate?
I'm well. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you very much for firstly taking the time out of your day to join me here on Mindclickers. I've been very excited about this chat, and I'm really looking forward to the things we can try and dig deep in today and talk about.
Me too. Let's do it.
Awesome. I guess we'll kick it off on Mindclickers. Basically, we always do an introduction, so I guess just a bit of a background about yourself, any experience in traditional sport even, and how you got engaged in the esports scene.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say I have a traditional corporate America background. I came from, sales, marketing, operations for a big telecom, and ended up moving all around the country in the United States. Getting more responsibility, building teams, which was great. Ended up working for the president at Sprint, driving brand and strategic partnerships. Got recruited from another company. And then realized hey, I don't, and no offense to Timo and Sprint and Verizon, but this is probably not what I want to do when I'm 70, right? We've moved around a lot and that's great. But yeah, so then it started, I had a really interesting network, and then started a consulting company for go to market and folks deploying strategy to branding and marketing and that kind of thing, and which led into a marketing company that bought our consulting company, which is Social Apex. And then, so what we do is we make, high level content. We do content, social media, and social media management. And we met Lorenzo Brown, LJ, which is one of the founders, right? And so he had this idea of super passionate about esports. He knew Sam Kulikov. LJ is our chief gaming officer. Sam Kulikov is our chief creative officer. And so Sam and LJ knew each other. LJ says, you know what? I love esports. The Midwest is underserved. We had the 2017 Madden champion. This is my belt for all the viewers at home. Pretend I'm making this really dope belt. But we thought, okay, well, this is really exciting. How can we help tell this story? So that quickly led into, man, there's a lot more that can be done, and let's just really go all in. So Sam and I went all in. We grabbed Alex Laughlin, who is our chief operating officer. And then we got ourselves a fancy strategic advisor named Jeremy Turman, which he'll probably cringe at me saying fancy. But, and then we thought, let's go out and do it, right? Let's just start figuring out how we can, connect all the good stuff that's happening in esports, not just in Kansas City, but in the Midwest, and go out and do something, a little different. And here we are today.
Fantastic. And so how's the success been, I guess, since you started, you created the Kansas City Pioneers up until today?
It's been great. We have 6 pro teams. We're competing at a very high level in top tier 1 and 2 esports. We have some fantastic content creators, amazing creatives. We are very fortunate to have, I think, about 50 total people. I think. Oh my gosh, we'll say 50-ish.
Yep.
How about we'll do the ish? 50-ish Kansas folks that are working hard to make Kansas City Pioneers a thing every day. And we're really proud of just the hard work that goes into it, and the folks that choose to come on to KCP and the sports that we get into. So it's been really nice. We had a Rocket League team competing at the highest level. We transferred that over to Shopify right at the end of the season, but we took them from, and we can get into it, right? So they were I think 15th-ish, a former team flight, and for them to end the season in top 6 in North America is pretty incredible, right? It's when we transferred it over, so that was great. We have a women's team and the WCBC, Women's Carball Championship. They completed their season and finished number 2, so they're number 2 in North America. So those ladies are cracked. And let's see what else. We have a Halo team, arguably the best team in North America. They fluctuate around top 1 to 3, and so we're really excited about the potential for Infinite. We have a Call of Duty guys that are playing in the Elite, and then we just signed a Rainbow Six team, And
Mm.
so we're really excited about that too. And then of course we have the beast mode guy, right? And then after selling our Rocket League team, we picked up a new Rocket League team. So we're excited about the upcoming season.
Mm-hmm.
Got an OG and some other talented folks
Yeah.
that I think are going to be really going to do some really good things. So that was a probably longer answer than maybe you wanted, but
That's
I'm
fine.
excited, man.
That's
Like
what we
that's what we're
do.
doing.
It really sounds like you're ticking all the boxes. Previously I've had on Mindclickers, especially from the North American region. I've had on a sports psychologist, a physiotherapist. It's definitely interesting to hear everything from their perspective surrounding the esports scene and development within North America. So how do you see, I guess, that development within the next 5 years? Because I'm pretty sure North America is the one region where they have the most esports organizations. Do you see that growing further and further, or do you see just the quality being developed a lot better?
I mean, I think it's a mix of both, right? Like, I think as it relates to, um, how you're playing at a high
Mm,
level, I think, whether it's what you're putting in your body, right? Like what kind of supplements, your sleep patterns, like how do you deal with stress, recovery, after a long stream and or tournament, how do you harness your chi? Like, how do you understand
mm-hmm.
flow? There's a lot of pressure, right? Like to compete at the highest. I wouldn't know. I don't compete at the highest level, but let's
Yep, gotcha.
assume, right? We know.
Yep.
But truly there is, right? So I think that just very similarly to how traditional stick and ball sports that we would call it take
Hmm.
some of those things that I just mentioned very seriously. You've seen over the last probably 18 months and maybe a little bit before, but at least in my observation, that there's more to high performance and from an esports and a gaming perspective, and that
Hmm.
unlocks a lot of different avenues, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I definitely think it's fantastic that you have that acknowledgement towards the health and performance side of things. Because I've had a chat with a couple of people within the industry, within Europe, who are a little bit on the edge in regards to performance. And you look at other organizations such as Excel and other people within North America, and they're really going full fledged on the performance side of stuff. They've got their own facilities. They're building complexes where they can have gyms, and they're really going, pretty much full send. And I think it's fantastic to see, and it's kind of disappointing to look to the Oceania region where I'm in when we don't have those resources. We don't have the ability to build up from the ground up, and that's kind of holding us back as a region. So, do you think that, I guess, in regards to looking towards the performance scene, we're going to see a lot more coming out of it in regards to next couple of years, where more organizations are going to be looking towards other organizations, and they're going to be thinking, hey, we like what they're doing. Let's start to do that.
Oh, 100%, right? Like a couple of reasons, because the proof will be that these teams will compete at a higher level,
Hmm.
or it'll be more sustainable, right? And there's
Yep.
ways to measure that. And then I think also, like, these are things that, investors, sponsors, and things can understand, right? So you think about
Yep.
corporate America 50 years ago. I'm sure it was completely different than it was like 10, 8 years, or gosh, whatever, 3 years
Yep.
ago, 5 years ago when I left, whatever. Which is to say that, like, health and wellness is important, benefits are important, right? Like keeping
Hmm.
your employees happy and giving them benefits and thinking about
Yep.
wellness and mindfulness and giving them resources to, for mind, body, and spirit. And so, like,
Hmm.
I don't think this is too far of a disconnect. Which is usually what pulls that through, right? When you're thinking about how do I deploy capital, to make the org successful, to make our team successful, to make the culture better, and
Yep.
those things are 100% going to contribute.
Yeah.
So I absolutely think that, and you can see it now just in the evolution of. You're already hearing it in different sports of, whether it's an analyst or whether it's like a coach that's mechanic, but then it's like,
Hmm.
hey, we need coaches that are specific to like flow and energy and
Hmm.
mindfulness, right? So just in terms of like the mind, and then yeah, you're going to see more folks that are like, if you're going to game all day, like you should probably hit the gym, like to be
Yeah.
like whatever, and you should also care about what you put in your body in terms of like health and supplements and some of these other
Hmm.
things. So like it really has to be the evolution, to continue to have, one, I think it's going to be the evolution for like the gamer and the streamer and the content creator that want to be a part of something that says, hey, you
Yep.
can give back a little bit more and provide assets. So that's going to
Yep.
differentiate yourself. And then you're also going to see those people that invest, those orgs that invest will kind of like, the proof will be in the pudding, kind of, right? Like, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I definitely agree. Because for my performance side of stuff, I guess what I do directly is work with teams to address the pillars of performance. So you have your hydration, sleep, exercise, nutrition, hand stretches, warm ups, cool downs, and that whole kind of movement really goes into, I guess, helping an individual perform at their best, right? So because I think you get to a certain stage where mechanically everyone is pretty much at the same level, right? And then it's the external things that we can look to change performance. So your mindset, your those pillars of performance. And I think that's definitely, if you look back 5 years when I was a player in esports, and I can just reflect on it, there definitely wasn't anything of that. There wasn't any assistance, there wasn't any coaches, there wasn't a sports psychologist on a team. It was pretty much go out and do it yourself, go out and go into a tournament yourself. And it's a big comparison to nowadays where you have so many, I guess, external allied health professionals helping to assist a team.
Well, that's exactly right. They were just like, here, just chug this energy drink, man.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
and
let's
just go.
just strap
Yeah.
in. You're ready. No, I think it's true. It's interesting. There was talk about an event that's coming up here in Kansas City, and it was interesting to see like optometry, psychology,
Hmm.
chiropractors, and it's like, yeah, it's just nice to see that like a lot of it goes into being like, a gamer and a streamer and a pro at the highest level,
Yeah.
right? Just assuming that like LeBron James just wakes up and like, is the greatest player ever, or whoever
Yeah.
you think is the greatest player. That's my example. Yeah, there's a lot of work, and it's just nice to see that like gaming and esports are being complemented by some of these other things that can make, to your point, like mechanically gifted players play even better,
Hmm.
right? Like optimize the
Yeah.
performance. So it just totally makes sense. 100%.
100%. 100%. And what's your take on, I guess, traditional media having an approach towards esports saying that, oh, they're not athletes, they're not gamers.
That's shifting, right? Like
Mm.
I think that's definitely shifting, and part of it is pop culture, as you see
Yep.
like Ninja on Sports Illustrated,
Right.
or like having a shoe deal, right? You're like,
Yeah.
huh, tell me more, right? So it's just kind of that association constantly with like
Hmm.
traditional sport, mediums and access, and then 100% when the traditional pro athletes, like for real game, like that's what they
Yeah.
do, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we're fortunate to have, I mean, it's interesting because we have a gold medalist, a Wimbledon winner, a Super Bowl champion, a former NBA pro, and it's like, they all want to throw on that. Well, I don't have a jersey on, whatever, but Kansas City Pioneers,
Yeah.
and like, but it's because they're passionate about it. It's because what they've done, and it's because they, appreciate, um, I guess, not just what the sport or gaming is given to them, but also like, being a part of something where people compete at a high level as well. So 100%, like, it's not just, it's not just me like grinding in the basement for like, whatever. And my parents yelling at me to come up, right? Like, it's not the
Yeah.
definition of like esports
Yeah.
anymore. And I think lands will continue to help. It's kind of been a little bit dormant,
Hmm.
so that's kind of cool. COVID obviously has been awful. One of the things that it did highlight was that like the way that people consume entertainment
Yep.
and media has changed. So we're seeing more people watch Twitch and YouTube and Facebook,
Hmm.
gaming. More people, like, there's a reason why when the pandemic struck, it was very difficult to get a Switch. It wasn't because all of the like
Yeah.
PC gamers and Xbox but were like, I need to get a Switch. It's because all the casual gamers were like, oh, I need to go, like, what am I gonna do with
Yeah.
my free time, right? It's like, it's guys in their 40s, men and women in their 40s, like, I have some downtime, I guess I'll try Animal Crossing, which leads into like Rocket League, which leads into maybe Apex Legends or something, right? So I
Yep.
think that also helped too, the way that the casual viewer, we're seeing more casual viewers, more casual gamers, and more entertainment based around,
Mm.
like Twitch.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that there has been that progressive connection between traditional sports and casual viewers of traditional sports. For example, I think I recall correctly on Twitch, um, they had some Formula One drivers actually do sim racing, and that really attracted some of the traditional sports audiences who watched Formula One. And then I think next week one of them actually went out and bought an actual sim racer. So, there's definitely a big connection, and that's kind of brinking the industry. And I think that's fantastic that we're seeing those things happen because I think the adoption is inevitable, right? I think that it's only a matter of years before esports really is the norm. And I think, the faster we bring that on, the faster the better.
100%. Like, whether it's Olympics, to your point, like getting, traditional sports athletes ingrained into their counterpart
Mm-hmm.
on the gaming side. And then, what else is going to drive it is really just the athletes themselves. Like, as we think about pop culture pulling in to make gaming seem like a sport, that
Mm-hmm.
you would consider basketball, but more people are watching esports than a lot of traditional
Yep.
sports, right? Like when we beat Energy in Rocket League, I believe 100. I mean, no offense to Energy, but when we were playing, it's like 186,000 people were watching that game. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of mind blowing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a lot of people.
A lot of people.
That's a lot of people, right? And then but what I was saying about like the traditional athletes, it's like it's interesting for them is because that's something where their brand can live beyond the sport, right?
Right.
Like that's one obviously an opportunity to monetize, connect to different sponsors, and really what I think is most interesting, at least talking to some of our traditional former traditional athletes, is that it's a really interesting way to connect with your fans, right? Like you
Yep.
can't come out of the huddle at Arrowhead Stadium and say like, "Hey, Lachlan, thank me, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming to the Chiefs game. It means a lot to
Yep.
me." It's like, no, I can't do that, but I can in
Yep.
my Twitch stream, right? Like I can say
Yep.
my name. I can't. Nobody's going to hear me yell for Jack Sock when he's at Wimbledon. He's like, well, we won't even hear my voice, but he might see
Yep.
me in Twitch, right? So
Yep.
I think there's a really interesting way that they can connect to their communities and build a larger
Yeah.
one, and the fact that we can have access to them is kind of insane,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Yep.
that's obviously going to be continue to be a catalyst, for a movement to, and just the younger generations are going to come up, and those are the sports. Just like nobody's watching, well, like traditional TV is not and traditional radio is not nearly as popular for a couple of reasons, right? Because
Right.
we want
Yep.
we want as a consumer, particularly younger, what we want when we want, how we want it, right? Like I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to wait every week from a Netflix. Just
Right.
like throw it all there and let me binge, right?
Yep.
I don't want to wait for the movie. I want over the top content. I want it now. I want to be able to stream it. I want to be able to talk to my friends wherever I go. I want to
Mm-hmm.
jump in their stream. So there's just so many nuances that make esports and gaming and being part of a community
Mm.
um, really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And do you think because we've experienced that, we've had that experience of developing relationships with, I guess, the content creators and being able to interact with them and have that connection, that there's really no going back to traditional way of viewing, such as traditional media.
Oh, I would totally agree. Like
Yep.
there's no reason to go back. And then
Yep.
also I think it's just it's also very simple to it's simple but not easy, I guess. But if you think about the past, year and a half or several months, right? That like Zoom calls and Google Hangouts have been the norm and like
Right.
the business world. So then you started seeing like the corporate America, folks going like, oh, we're going to have a virtual happy hour. And then it's like, oh, so now you kind of get an idea of what building a community your own and why I
Yep.
would have my own Discord channel and why you should come watch me stream and why like I reward you because
Yep.
you're a homie. So yeah, I don't think we're going to go back. And candidly, there's really no reason to. And once everyone is cleared across the globe to be able to
Mm-hmm.
connect face to face at lands and stuff, that's
Yep.
not going to like change in terms of like, oh, like less online interaction, right? I mean, it's just
Mm.
not.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think that, as unfortunate COVID was, where traditional sports was essentially halted, esports pretty much grew exponentially, right? Because nothing can really change. Yes, lands are cancelled, but online still goes online. And I think that's definitely, definitely a positive that's come out of COVID in regards to the growth, in regards to, as you mentioned, traditional sports athletes getting engaged within esports and building their own, marketing themselves online. And I think that's fantastic.
365. right?
Yeah, for
24/7,
sure.
365. That's just never stops.
Yeah. So when we're actually just briefly talking about traditional sports athletes, it started to really connect. So what happens if we took a traditional sports athlete, for example, a Madden player or an NBA player, and then put them in Madden or NBA 2K at the elite level? Would they be able to mechanically be able to understand the game to the same degree as someone who previously, as a professional player, would be? You reckon?
I mean, I think it would be like strategy wise, yes, but like it's one of those kind of like false equivalencies, right? Like just
Mm,
because I'm, great at maybe I'm a very high elite pro player, football player. Like maybe I don't want
right.
to play Madden. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Maybe
yeah.
like I'm probably playing Call of Duty, right? Or Fortnite.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I think from a strategy perspective, but like it's just different mechanics, right? It's different.
Hmm.
It's 100% different experience, right? Getting
Yeah.
tackled in real life is probably,
A little
for
bit
sure,
different.
is a little bit different than like whatever, right? So, I would
Yeah.
say from a strategy standpoint, yeah, but mechanically, there's too many different things, right? Like no. So it is interesting, though. A lot of people, that we talk to specifically because of some of the folks that do stream and create content for
Hmm.
us. It's like, oh, do they want to play? Like he like spoiler alert, like for sure he'll play Madden, but he also likes to open Pokemon on his stream. That's probably
Yeah.
his number one thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of funny.
For sure. And so you mentioned you currently have 6 games that you're competing in, and obviously one of those being Rocket League. And obviously recently you picked up a massive player, Kronovi. So how did that how did that whole process go about? And I guess how excited are you guys to have Kronovi on board?
Super excited. I like the mountain, right? Like OG. Yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think we love Rocket League for a lot of
Hmm.
reasons, and we, Astro, Aeon, Bob is Bell, Cat Jeans, the whole team that comes over. We're super excited about the opportunity to crush it next season, and yeah, it goes about like how you would think every kind of like recruiting thing is, right? Like we have
Hmm.
folks that are looking for roster changes. Who could we go get, et cetera. And then you have some dialogue, and hopefully we do a really good job of representing like who we are as the pioneers and what,
Yeah.
how our community is and what we care about. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it just turned out to be a really, really good fit. And like, we're pumped for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, how does that scouting process look like? Because I had a talk with another CEO of Fury Global, an organization here over in Australia, and we had a kind of a chat in regards to, I guess, searching for an individual who is already well developed within the scene, versus searching for an individual who has potential that you can build up and that you can start to, I guess, work upon themselves. So, what do you guys look for when you scout for a team, and what's the thought process that goes into it?
I mean, the short answer is it depends, right? It depends on what
Mm,
sport you
yeah.
want to be in. It depends on, you can, like, I shouldn't say, let's just assume that all of the players, are love your organization and aren't under all these like kind of things, but
Right.
you can
Yep.
go out and deploy capital to go get the best performing team generally. Or that's not true. Um, some of the best, right? Like some teams are getting signed, like in Rocket League, I think for a couple of years, but most aren't, right? So after the
Hmm.
season, things shake
Yeah.
up. You wait for roster mania or whatever, and so that's kind of it, right? Like, and then what we do, and I think LJ and Eddie on our team do a really good job of just paying attention to so many things from like like
Right.
deep in the subreddits to like 1v1 tournaments to like like who's 14 getting ready to turn 15 that can compete, right? Like
Right.
because
Yeah.
we had to do that with beast mode when we picked up beast mode, which was on our original Rocket League team. And
Yeah.
so just a lot of it's very much like paying attention, scouting, thinking about like what who we could put together as an existing team. Are we going to do we need a sub? Do we need this? And so I think those are the questions that you kind of ask yourself. Like, do you want to grab
Mm,
like, are you going to grab one person and build around? Are you going to try to build like a team? Are you going to provide different coaching?
yeah.
Do you have different like, kind of amenities and things that we were talking about a little bit earlier that could be helpful. So
Yeah.
there's quite a few like levers to pull, but in terms of scouting, like just really paying attention. And that's one of those things that you don't wait until hey, we should like, like we should
Yeah.
get a CS:GO team. Like it would take a
Yeah.
lot of work starting today if we made that decision, right? And so
Yeah.
we're always kind of looking, and those are the things we think about.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And so I assume you have your base players, and then do you also have a coaching team? So do you have a game coach, or what does that kind of coaching um, combination look like?
Yeah, it depends, right? Like it depends on the sport.
Right.
Some I would say, there's mechanics coach, there's, mindful, kind of more mental coach that we've had. There's
Mm,
analytics coaches.
yep.
There's kind of coach team manager. So there's
Right.
to varying degrees. Really, at the end of the day, it's like what can we provide our players to make them the most comfortable and successful,
Mm,
and
yeah.
so they have an input in that too, right? It's not just like,
Yeah.
welcome to our team, Lachlan. You need a coach. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, hey, tell me why, or maybe I do, right? Or thank you, right? Or no, I
Yeah.
got it. So I think it depends for us. So we have quite a few different. Depends on the sport, and it depends on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I guess, running through a hypothetical, what say, you, I guess, had a team, you picked up a team and, you really saw the potential to really compete at that tier one big, international level. But, you approached the players about a coach and they were really resistant about it. They were saying, no, we don't need that. We've already got to the level of where we're at because we haven't had a coach. So, why would we need a coach now? How would you address it and how would you, I guess, deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, you would hope that you have built a good enough relationship where it wouldn't be just a firm yes or no, right? It's like,
Coach
right,
you
like
later.
so,
Yep.
yeah. So in your hypothetical, I hope that we've done a really good job of building a great culture
Yep.
and having an open door policy and being very transparent and authentic, which I think
Hmm.
all those things we do. Um, yeah, I think you just have to talk about just a couple, like you would do anything with trying to convince somebody your point, right? Like you would show them
Mm,
maybe some data sets and say, hey, here, here's some suggestions. Here's what we're thinking. Here's the reasoning why behind it. Here might be some examples of other teams, whether it's in the same sport or whether it's in a different, like, that went from, hey, they shifted to this and they shifted and they did this. And like, we
yeah.
saw some things. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just having like some discussion about that. I mean, if you would want to, like you could say at the end of the day, it's like, oh, like we're just going to make this decision of yes, you will. But I would say that it would never get to that point to where, um, and there's a lot of ways to do it. Just like, okay, fine, right? Like, well, let's just see if we could bring somebody in for scrims, right? Let's just
Mm,
see if we could just bring somebody in for casual, right? Let's just
right.
see if we can bring somebody in just to chat with y'all, right? Like even off the game. So I think there would be quite a few
Mm.
ways that we could say, hey, help us help you, right?
Yeah, for sure. That entry building rapport level where they can kind
Yeah,
of test the waters to see
yeah,
if it's suitable for them.
yeah. I mean, forcing anything on anyone is a terrible idea.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
that's just good rule of thumb.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate to that. Previously doing some, I guess, coaching in the CS scene over here, and definitely sleep schedules and all that kind of sleep kind of regime for one player wasn't really the best, and they were pretty much flat out resistant to it. So then it was just a matter of trying to evoke those underlying motivations towards their sleep, and I guess why they were so hesitant to look at sleep so positively and see how it can affect their performance on game day. And I ended up being able to change that and actually performed really well on game day. So that was fantastic. So, most often than not, it is that kind of rapport building process and, developing that understanding with your athletes, which is crucial and key.
Yeah, I think so. That it's all about trust, right? Like
Yeah,
they have to feel that the org is behind them, that we have their best interest, or else it does feel forced and a little bit of contrived and like
for sure.
disingenuous, and that's the last thing, right? So
Definitely. So previously you mentioned team culture. How important to you is it developing a team culture that's has good synergy that represents, I guess, the ideal characteristics that you want to represent? Because we see a lot of different teams who have distinct team cultures, right? We have teams that who win a game, they pop off and they're all aggressive and they're like in people's faces and really getting into it. We have teams that who win a game and destroy it, but then remain silent and just sort of compose their own kind of their own way. So how important to you is developing a distinct key team culture?
I mean, the culture is everything. It's the reason, there's an emotional and rational commitment that people have, right? And so culture is a big part of the emotional commitment. versus like, oh, I have to stream today, right? Like we've not done a great job if somebody's like, I have to play in the finals today, right? Like this is terrible. Yeah, and I think the other thing is like we don't, our goal is not to try to bring somebody on and change them, right? So like,
Right.
it's either complement or do something for a catalyst for them, but it's definitely not to go like, we shouldn't expect that like if you're that person that kind of
Yeah.
pops off as an example, we shouldn't go out and try to recruit you and get to the very end of like, hey, welcome, and like, oh, by the way, don't do that, that's not who we are and that's not our culture, and you're just like, did you not watch any of my VODs? Like what don't you know who I am, right? So I
Yeah.
think the idea is not to change people, right? And so there's a lot of delta in like what we're looking for and who people are, but ideally it's never to change somebody. So you
Yeah,
should
for
know what
sure.
you're getting, right? It's generally not a surprise. It would be a surprise on our end if we bought oranges and we got home and we were mad that they were apples, or we were like, turn into apples, you're like, what? You bought oranges? What are you talking about, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So anyways.
So, have you guys had any teams that have, I guess, competed internationally or have traveled internationally to another LAN or tournament, or how's that process been for you guys?
No, so far we haven't had anybody try. Let's see. We had Drakar Halo. I guess he came from Canada to Kansas to do like a
Right.
boot
Yep.
camp or whatever,
Okay.
and it was. I feel it was not the greatest experience for him traveling back and forth internationally. I think like
Right.
not well, anyways, through North America, but yeah, I think it was like there was like a COVID test and that he took and he had to wait, and then he got stuck at the airport and he had to wait another day, which meant he had to take another test because of the time, and
Gotcha.
so he had some kind of
Gotcha.
like like some shenanigans there. I mean, nothing bad, right? It had nothing to do with his health
Yeah.
or anything. He was, a-okay and tip top and had no COVID, and that was great. He just got stuck a little bit in America longer than I think he wanted, but
Right.
that was fine. But other than that, like, no, we haven't done that. I'm trying to think because the WCBC, most everything has been online, right? And
Mm,
so the most of the sports that we're playing, there is no land. So,
right. For
but there
sure.
will be, sir.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And you mentioned boot camps. Is that something you guys are looking towards in the future in experimenting, just to help with developing player synergy within each other, and external to esports, and being able to build those personality and relationships external to the game, which can then in return help them in game.
Yeah, I think it's everything that we talked about, right? Like playing
Mm,
together, playing different, putting them in an environment that's different, but they're together,
yep.
is helpful. Just plus the fun stuff of like shooting content and getting to know each other, and like just driving
Yep.
home that kind of like we care about you, we appreciate you, like it's
Hmm.
we're behind you, thanks for being here type stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of good reasons, I think, whether it's reward or recognition or mental or
Mm,
just synergies with the team. So yeah, I think those things are super important for sure. Just get them out of the
definitely.
element, get them together.
For sure, awesome. And I guess boot camps definitely have that impact of, as you said, getting a team out of their element and building their synergy, and hearing from that, because I previously had on a player from the Direwolves. It was actually my first episode, and he talked about, I guess, his experience as a team in Korea, and the different experiences they went through, and that actually built them, built different relationships and connections they think they wouldn't have built if they hadn't have done that boot camp. So I definitely think there is a big importance and stress of, I guess, taking players away from their environment and putting them in an environment they're unfamiliar with, and then seeing how that relationship and synergy builds, for sure.
I mean, I do think that there's a lot of value in it, right? Because of all
Hmm.
those reasons, and not. I think what I think is the more interesting part, besides like the culture and getting together and having fun and saying thank you and appreciative, is really just taking them out of an environment. Even if you play together every day, right? Like if you're in the team house, it's like it's completely different when all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, we're in Korea now, right? Our team house is in Germany.
Yeah.
Like this is different, right? So like,
Yeah.
I think that yeah, kind of getting out of their environment, seeing how they respond, and then of course like getting some dubs hopefully, but even playing together and saying, hey, we went through this experience, it was really cool, and of course, like, our org's behind us and we feel really great about it is I think good for everyone involved.
For sure, definitely. So, what is, I guess, KCP's vision towards the future? Is it expanding internationally? Is it expanding and building that actual quality of team within North America? Or, what is your vision towards, I guess, KCP and the Pioneers?
Yeah, it's just competing to or continuing to compete at a high level and tier one and
Yeah,
tier two esports. I mean, that's really it. And
yeah,
then continue to build our community, continue to scale with internally, continue to with which is like our creative team. And
hmm
then scale with content creators that resonate to either our community or the sport that we're in. And so yeah, it kind of just depends, like I'm not
yeah,
saying tomorrow we're all in Dota, right? Like you're like you're like, wait, okay, that's not like very specific
yeah,
to North America, but yeah. So I think it will depend. I will say this, that our goal is not to be in like 15 different sports or whatever.
yeah.
Our like I think 6 or 8 is a really good sweet spot for us.
hmm
So yeah.
So, is there any, I guess, interest, or maybe that's kind of you slipped under the rug, but is there any interest, I guess, looking at Valorant?
Yeah, for sure. Valorant is yeah. I mean, that's short answer is yes, yes, there is.
Yeah.
Like I hear it's going to be a big thing. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, of course
Yeah.
it's a big thing. Yeah, we'll look at it. We have looked at it. We've talked to people like as every
Mm,
org does, right? And so
yeah.
it's about timing. It's about like how we deploy, how we enter. What does that look like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for sure, Valorant is up there. I
Yeah,
think I
for sure.
mentioned CS:GO, right? Like we
Yeah.
were in Gears before, so we're always kind of looking. We're definitely not, just scouting for the sport that we're in, right? Because we feel pretty
Yeah.
good about the one where we're at and two who we have, right? So yeah, like we're always looking.
For sure. And do you think that in regards to, I guess, within the North American esports, scene and region, you can look towards other organizations and try and see what they're doing, or was it more so we want to build our own, we want to know what we're doing, and we want to try and continue our legacy?
It's definitely the latter, but you would be remiss if you didn't pay attention to your competition, right? So you should
Right.
definitely know, right? Like you should,
Yeah.
like, you don't want to just be running, an esports org with not understanding
hmm
what's going on or who you're playing against or why fans are interested there
hmm
or, what endemic, non-endemic sponsors. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of things that go up, but at the end of the day, like we feel that the Midwest is underserved, right? And so
Right.
we want to anchor here and then build fans all over the world. It's like very, very
Yeah.
similar like traditional sports, right? Like the stadium is here, the players come here, but they all don't live here, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, so to continue in that vein, we'll pay attention to other people, right? But we don't want to be
hmm
pegged as like, oh, you're a Kansas City. It's not a. I mean, we're Kansas City formed, like globally, driven, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and also from a geographic standpoint, like there's a couple of geo orgs, like geographical orgs, right? So there's like
Right.
Pittsburgh Knights and Susquehanna and Alpine,
hmm
Pittsburgh Knights. Did I say that twice? Anyways, yeah, there's a couple of geographically based teams, but we're not trying to replicate anyone either, right? So
mm.
we're going to continue to do our own thing and crush it.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And you mentioned sponsorships, and I guess that kind of stakeholder resource economy of things, which is something I'm quite interested in. I previously had a chat with Dave from Genevieve Capital, and that was a really interesting conversation in regards to different regions and looking towards economical models. For example, you look towards the Asian model, and in regards to their economy, they're a lot player driven in regards to pushing, pushing, pushing. But you look to OCE in the Australia region, and it's more so a little bit lower, but it's more spread. Hang on. So, in regards to, I guess, sponsorships and stakeholders, how does that process apply if someone comes to you and said, "Hey, we're interested in sponsoring this team." What does that process look like?
Yeah, and I mean it's like to what scale, right? Why? Um, and then also like we're pretty transparent, and I work really hard to be authentic. And by that I mean our goal is not to have sponsors that do not correlate to who we are, to who our fans are, etc. So as an example, I've said this a few times, but like, early on, we didn't take sponsorships from like Dave's used mattress farms, right? Like there you go, right? Like that's just, right? Even if they had a ton of like, oh, but like, here's like $1 million a day or something. It's just like, no, that's weird. So we really want, like, I say that jokingly to say that like, it's much more, it's more of a partnership, number one, right? Like it's a sponsor, but we look at it as a partnership. One of the things that differentiate us, I think, and we're not the only ones. There's some orgs out there that make some insanely good content, but we're one of them, right? Where that's a huge value that we bring, and we do that because we're excited about who we're partnering with. So if you look at like DoorDash as an example, like that's a real thing that everyone uses. Like this is not fake, right? Like we're not to the like, hey, we'll give you guys like a code to sell Mercedes G-Wagons. It's like, oh, sure. All of our, I'm going to say half the people in our Discord like would buy one tomorrow, right? So, shout out Mercedes. But like what I say that to mean, it's like we want to grow with the partners. We want to have the right partners and sponsors at the right time. And it needs to be like specific to how we feel about how our fans and how our players interact and what they need, right? And it's an interesting question because there's a lot of non-endemic or, companies that aren't traditionally in esports that are now like, how do I get in esports and gaming?
How do I get in? Exactly.
Right? So it used to be, coming from the marketing space, it was like Gen Z. And now it's like, oh, but it's Gen Z, but gaming, right? Like, so how do we do that? And it's just like, okay, well, a slow and steady wins the race, maybe. But so, yeah, I think it's always for an interesting conversation. But first it starts like, hey, is it authentic? Like, do we use this? Can we get behind it? Would we, be really excited to tell our friends and family about it, to use it, try it, et cetera, whatever. Does it make sense to our fans and our players, obviously? And is it a good partnership, right? Because if it's just like slap a logo on, it's just like, that's not good for them either. Like, what is that? Like, so let's find a way that like we can grow together. And so, those are some of the things that we think about.
Yeah, for sure. I love that vision. I love that kind of that passion and being able to incorporate your community and your viewers and your audiences and your players as well. There's definitely, obviously not going to name names. There's definitely a couple of organizations, global who I guess have more of a who can I get approach. And it's not about developing those connections that you've already embedded within the organization that can therefore have outreach to your audiences and you who you connect with. So I definitely, I respect that that passion in developing those underlying connections and relationships with your audiences.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like it's not an easy thing to do, right? Because like, it's if you look at, if you just look at kind of the revenue model from an esports perspective, like the lion's share comes from sponsorships, right? And so when big brands start thinking like, hey, right, we should, and it is a great way to reach a very difficult demographic for a lot of reasons, right? If you're a marketing agency or if you're, a marketing arm of a company on the sponsorship side. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely deals where it's like, maybe, but like, but for us, it definitely has to be, it has to meet some of that criteria for sure.
For sure, definitely. And I think, looking towards sponsorships, I think probably one of the biggest ones you can look to is, I guess, in the way of, esports, nutrition and energy drinks and that kind of domain of things. What's your thought on those things? And do you think that, that's really needed?
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's evolving though, right? Like you see some of the newer, and I won't name any names, but more scientific base, more white paper base, more like care about what you're putting in your body, and ingredients are important, and so like more natural, and so I think you can the energy drinks of like the early 2000s, like man, like what I mean, like that's one way to fix that guy's sleep schedule. Just binge out for like 4 days on those things. Yeah, so I think it is important, right? Like I mean, certainly as an organization, you look at, verticals, right? Like what, make sense from a sponsorship perspective, right? Is it,
Mm-hmm.
food, whatever, we don't have to go through it. But it's funny because there's like energy drink, but it's almost like pivoted to like health and wellness for us to
Right.
start thinking about like, hey, let's have a broader conversation, because it doesn't just have to be, a traditional drink. But yeah, I
Mm.
do think it's important, and I do think that some of the food category there, or the beverage category, has kind of cornered the market for a long time, and so it's
Yep.
really exciting to see some of these other companies come in and talk about like different
Mm.
kind of ingredients and different ways that it helps you improve, and why post recovery, or
Yep.
etc. But yeah, I think it's very important. And by the way, it's like, if you're sitting at your setup all day, you're probably going to have a couple of beverages. So we should definitely care about what you're putting in your body.
Definitely catering towards your external performance from that. I guess catering towards your internal environment. So I definitely agree with that. I guess we'll start to turn the gas off and start to roll down the hill is the metaphor we use here in Mindclickers to say that the episode's gradually coming to an end. But one thing I love to do at the end of every episode is, I guess, get a little bit of insight from your perspective. So say we run through a hypothetical that there is a team, or a couple of players who have just formed a team who are really looking to take it to the next level. They've started entering some tournaments. They've started to create some voice and some reason for themselves within the esports region and within the esports scene. What advice would you give to some of these people who are looking to take their team or looking to take their individual gameplay to the next level, to start to look towards an organization?
A couple things is like, if are they wanting to build their own organization, because that's a little bit different answer, but we'll just assume that they do, right? Or that they want to join. I think it's like with anything, you have to have like the why that you're doing it. Like, what is your why?
Right.
And then so from that, you get your mission and your vision, right? And then that kind of becomes your North Star of like who you talk to, why it's important. So there's kind of that. Like we fall back on that a lot, right? Like I use what was it, like Larry's used mattress farm, but like, yeah, like that doesn't align to our vision and values and our why, right? So that was an easy no. Not that that's a real company, but you see what I'm saying. So for them in that situation, it's like keep competing at a high level, have a plan, right? Like I've talked to, we're pretty accessible. I think like it's, in my career, just as a side note, what I'll say is that, mentors and mentees and asking people for help, generally most people will do that, right? So
Mm.
I definitely would say reach out, find people that you can bridge and broker your relationships and find out about. Depends on how serious you want to get, right? But it's like, you're going to need an LLC. You're going to need like insurance. If you get a big sponsor, you're going to need like, there's a lot of things that you may need that you may not know. So kind of like have your plan, right? What's your 30, 60, 90,
Yep.
what's your 18 months, right? How do you measure it? And then the other thing that I think is really, really important is content, content, content. At the end of the day, people want to connect to you. Why are you
Mm-hmm.
doing what you're doing? What makes you different as a player? You're great, fantastic, but tell me more,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Right.
it's simple but not easy, right? Like, so you're definitely going to have to commit to like, practicing and VOD and all this stuff, and then at the same time, like, go out and make some YouTube videos, right? And like make sure you're on social media, so that way, like, you can build an audience a little bit deeper. Yeah, so those are probably some things that I would say, depending on what the
Yep.
ultimate goal is. But yeah.
It depends. Yep, for sure. Well, I definitely appreciate that. It seems like it's like a nice cheat sheet of the things you really got to consider. And I guess if you start to tick off some of those boxes, at least if you start that process of ticking, you have some sort of general sense and direction in where you want to go, and that passion's gradually going to spur that on. So I really appreciate that insight, and I definitely think that there's a lot of players and coaches who listen to my clickers who are a little bit uncertain about that direction, where they want to go and whether they want to pursue a career in esports professionally and long term, and that kind of how that process starts to begin to come to fruition. So I really appreciate that, Mark.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, just like anything, right? But there's a lot that goes into it. And that's what's so exciting
Mm.
about, gaming in general or esports. It's like there's casting and production and content. And then when you get into content, it's like, oh my gosh, it's graphics, videography, 3D, 2D, skins. Like, oh my gosh, like somebody has
Yep.
to do the taxes, right? Somebody has to be finance, right? Somebody has to run your social media. And so that part is really exciting, but you also have to have a plan for that, right? Like, who are you going to get? Who do you know? How are you going to do it, right? Like, if you're a player or a coach, like it's a good idea to have like
Mm.
counsel, like legal, that like there are real contracts that happen, and
Yep.
we would never want anybody just to sign them and send, right? Like, so yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and it's just like, it's probably like anything, like take it as a plan. Like, it's one thing to be like really competitive and highly competitive in a
Mm-hmm.
sport. That's probably not, that's what you're doing, that not necessarily
Yep.
what your vision is. So how do you just make these small little bite-sized pieces to get where you're going, and ask a lot of questions to a lot of people that you like, people that are doing the same, and that will be really helpful in your journey.
For sure. Fantastic. I really appreciate that. I guess also for everyone listening, where can we find you on all your socials, and where can we find the KCP as well?
Yeah, so kcp.gg, Pioneers GG on mostly everything. I think everything. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for that. I should definitely know that. Yeah, it's the best way to find us for sure.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate coming on today, Mark. And I think we had a really good chat in regards to looking at North American as an ecosystem, but then also looking at the KCP and what they're doing as a whole, and that kind of that ground up structure, and looking towards external allied health professionals, and looking at the player to coach relationship. And I really think there's some fantastic key points that people can take from this episode that can really be incorporated into their scene and in their region as well. So I really appreciate coming on and sharing some of those crucial insights.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk KCP all day.
No worries. Thank you very much, Mark, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I gotcha.